we've got Xeno on the line, him, coming out of South Korea, my favorite Korea for now. And the use of the term God, how does that not always refer to the folklore of a bearded man? I think I read that wrong. That does not always refer to the folklore of a bearded man. Xeno,
Sure.
tell us what you mean. Secularity wants to know, and I'm curious too.
I'm interested.
Yeah.
Okay. So what I mean by that is I never meant to say always. If she put always in there, then that was a mistake. But a lot of the times it does refer to this bearded man, and I kind of wanted to go a little bit deeper than the bearded man and go past the religious bullcrap, if we can.
I think that's what the call screener had put down, and just lay the blame at my feet.
Yeah, it's
Join
probably
the club.
Johnny's
Okay.
fault.
Join the club.
I guess just real quick, Xeno, like I probably have not thought about God. Like when I hear people talk about God or supernatural, divine, like I probably haven't thought it in that context in such a long time that like I never think about when somebody says God, the thing that comes to my mind is not a bearded man. So I don't think the vast majority of people that use that term think about it in that way. So I would definitely love to delve more into those other concepts of God.
Okay. So a question. If I create an infinite regress in a system, I start the infinite regress. Is it possible for me to be outside of that infinite regress, or am I stuck in the infinite regress itself?
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I know that there are things like infinite sets and things. I know when we talk about infinity, a lot of times it's a lot more than what people are trying to make of it. Like an infinite regress, from my understanding, and again, definitely not a mathematician here, definitely not a physicist, but from my understanding, infinite regresses aren't actually as problematic as people like to talk about. It's just a different type of infinity. And I know that may sound like, oh, what the hell is SR talking about? But also, like, you know, there are papers and stuff. There are like whole institutions that study this stuff. So, but yeah, I'm not sure with that question you asked. I don't know. If you start an infinite regress, can you ever get outside of it? I'd say probably not, but I don't know where.
Well, as a programmer, you could program in an infinite regress and be outside of it as the programmer, but that wouldn't make me God, correct? Because I started that.
Yeah,
I'm not God. So we have to go. So when we talk about an infinite regress, I'm just demonstrating if the universe is an infinite regress and something is outside of it, that thing still is not God, and we have to go beyond that too. Do you get what I'm saying?
Not entirely. I mean, I'm understanding and following along in the sense that if you're saying that just because some entity of some kind created this particular type of existence, being one that we call an infinite regress, and not delving further into that and trying to break apart like infinite sets or whatever all that nonsense is, like, yeah, I mean, sure. Okay.
Okay.
Let's go deeper.
So another question that will we can circle back around to what this is all about. Would you agree that definitions could be erroneous, like incorrect, the way we define things?
Yeah.
I don't know what you mean by that.
They could be like the black swan, the white swan, black swan.
Yeah. Are you saying a description of the thing that we're describing could be incorrect, or are you saying a definition?
Yeah,
because definitions are more subjective in the sense that we create them and we play with them, whereas when we're doing the whole description thing, that's kind of supposed to be more on the objective side, right? Like whether or not I think about a gray rabbit in a certain way doesn't change the description of a gray rabbit.
Yeah, sure, because what you're trying to really do, because you don't have 100% knowledge of everything, you're really trying to do your best to describe an abstract. You know what I mean? So, and the abstract itself is what you're trying to wrap your mind around the phenomena and define what that is. And so I would say that God is an abstract entity. But who gets to define exactly what that is, right? So you
The
might
individual
define,
that believes in the
and
thing, the individual that accepts a claim is going to be using a definition. Whether that's the same definition that other people use doesn't seem to me to matter too much. If you come to me and say, this is what I think of when I say a God, then I'll just accept that as being what God is, and then we'll work through it, right? That's like the
okay,
triomni thing. The triomni thing
Yeah.
doesn't work because of logical inconsistencies. Cool, we can move on. But that person that presented that argument, that was how they were defining God. That's why I say every single version of a God I've ever heard does not exist. I take the positive stance on that. So
okay.
I don't think there's an
So
overarching description or definition of what God is, which is why I like the agnostic or theological non-cognitivist aspect of it. We just don't know what we're
well,
talking about.
I could make you agree with a definition of God because there's so many definitions.
Sure,
of
but if
God
it's so
definition.
if it's so vague and doesn't have any relation to reality, or you're just substituting the word God for other things, like when people say to me, God is love, those are 3 words. That's a very, very short sentence. It should be a lot easier. The problem is that most of the time when people say stuff like that, they're saying like what we think of as love, which may not be like perfectly defined, but we've got like a decent enough understanding, that actually is indistinguishable from God. But the problem with that is that doesn't make any sense. So God is just like a feeling. Is that what you're saying? But no, they add other attributes. So
No, no,
yes, you
feelings are
could
also
give a
abstract.
definition,
So
Xeno. Hang on a sec. You could give a definition of God that technically I mean I accept as existing, like this is a red cup. You may think I'm faking it here. You may think this is virtual reality, but this is definitely a red cup. If you want to say God is all plastic red cups, fine, but that seems like a worthless definition of God.
yeah, I would
Xeno
never
has
say
something else
God
in
is a
mind.
red cup.
Okay.
Xeno has something else in mind. So to take us back to, and I am enjoying this. How does this not? Okay, so term God does not always refer to the folklore of a bearded man. So I think you're talking about that which has set a hypothetical infinite regress in motion. Is that what your definition of God is?
No, he
Like
said, I'll
No.
let Xeno talk. I'll
What
let you
I'm
talk.
saying is some entity could have set everything into motion, into an infinite regress, and that thing still would not be God. We have to go before that itself.
Okay.
So you would have
So
to
what would be before that?
conceptualize.
Yeah, what would be before
So
that?
what is before that? Well, whatever properties make up, whatever abstract properties make up the thing that caused that. Like, let's say the Big Bang.
Give me one of those
Called,
properties.
like God, the Big Bang. Then you'd have to discuss what happened. Well, what caused the Big Bang, and then what happened before that, right? So it's like a domino effect. What I'm not trying to say there was a first domino either, because that would just be another theory, and there's billions of theories. What I am saying is there is some truth to what happened. That's what we do know, unless you would say there is no truth and everything just is. But that truth basically is God, and that truth is beyond whatever set everything into infinite motion.
So the problem, Xeno, the problem that I have is exactly the reason why I love agnosticism and theological non-cognitivism. And I know those are big words, but I definitely suggest looking into them and reading what some of the much smarter people than myself or Johnny have written and talked about for many a year. What you're doing is you're giving such a vague and uninteresting, worthless, no possible way of determining one way or the other type definition. We are basically at the point that you scoffed at when I said, are you telling me that God is a red cup? Because I believe this red cup exists. Sure. You said that truth is God. Well, what are you saying there? Are you saying that the correspondence between a proposition and the actual entity itself, that correspondence, is what God is?
No,
because
no,
then
no.
I would say that doesn't make sense.
No, what I'm saying is, first, You can't push me into a corner to define that property in which we have never discovered. That would be dishonest.
But you believe in it? You believe in something that you can't define the properties of?
Sure, we believe dark matter exists, and we can't define that either. So
we can define properties of dark matter. We may not have 100% understanding, but we do have enough of a description, and we have enough evidence that has shown that this exists, at least in a capacity very similar to what we have laid out. Like, we didn't always know what gravity was, but we worked on it.
Yeah, and also, Xeno, if I may, like, wade into this very uncomfortably cold pool with my toes, I would say that dark matter is a name for a something that we were zeroing in on, that is an attempt to explain a phenomenon that we see in physics with regards to, gravity and all that jazz. Okay. It is a thing. It is an inanimate thing. But a god or a super god is somehow has consciousness and makes decisions and is not just an inanimate object that we can find. It's a little bit more than just, like whenever they have like gravitational lensing, right? For example, okay. There's an object there. There's something going on there that's bending light. It's doing something. Okay. That's a far cry from there is a loving, all-knowing, all-powerful, all-everywhere being that exists outside of time and space that cares about who you fuck. I mean, it's a big difference. And even if you go to a Gnostic God, which it sounds like maybe that's where you could be going to, you do appear to be, Xeno. You do appear to be describing this entity that has a form of super consciousness without having any direct contact with it. This again, Xeno, this is kind of your bag. I think it's cool. I think it's cool that you think like this. What I'd like to know is, and maybe you do this already, but I did a little philosophy studying when I was in college and in high school and even after that. And there are concepts that the ancients and subsequent types like ourselves have bandied about. And I wonder, have you been studying physics and cosmology and been studying the more advanced sitting on the shoulders of giants kind of concepts that new contemporary cosmologists say about the origins of the universe and the nature of cause and effect and how it breaks down and all that jazz? And maybe you have. And what is thy response?
Yeah. So I have studied that. Okay, and good. In my studies, what I'm understanding is that we continue to hit a wall, and we continue to introduce different concepts to get closer to what we believe cosmology actually is, and how we're applying that in everyday life. What we're starting to figure out is every time we learn something, there's new data that arises that changes what we thought previously, which would suggest that it's very it may suggest that we might never figure it out. Yeah. We may never figure it out, but what you can apply is a mathematical formula, which could be what you do know, which is 0.00001, subtracted by how much information is in the universe, right? So that means there's 99.99999% of all these things you don't understand. And then the little fraction that you do know, it's basically, that's like we're little germs on a rock trying to figure things out. All I'm trying to point out is that God would be the reason you exist. I'm not just trying to say God is a reason. What I'm saying is to define exactly what that thing is would be nearly impossible. But to deny its existence would kind of be silly.
So hang on, Xeno, hang on.
Mhm.
Because a couple of things there for sure. One, again, if you remember, Johnny is a little bit less hard of a stance on this than I am. Okay, but I'm in the boat of saying every version of a god that has ever been described to me fails in some way. Every single definition or version of a god I have ever come across in my life or been presented supposed evidence with fails. So if your God is one of the different ones, if it's one of those outside of those, the general classical theism and yada yada and all that stuff, well, that's fine. But you have the burden of giving us the description for the thing that you accept as being real. And so if
Okay.
you don't
Okay, I
have
can
a
do that.
definition, if you don't have a way to define that entity, then I have to ask you, why do you accept it as true?
Okay. So I would look at this as this is similar like a cause and effect. So if your hand is wet and I say, well, what caused your hand to be wet? And you don't know anything about water, you don't get the chance to know what water is to then say, oh yeah, there's this thing called water. So when you're talking about God, this is an extremely intermediate subject. You can't think you could tackle this like, oh, I can do a quick Google search on what God is and just look it up. Like, no, we're talking about the thing that you can't observe, but there's an effect that comes from it. So from that effect, they're going to extrapolate the fact that you're here and know that there's a reason why you're here. And I'm saying God is that reason. I'm not saying he has it, he, she, whatever it is, has consciousness, but it's definitely functioning. It could be like a substance.
Hang on, real quick, Xena. Let me just jump in, because I know we're getting kind of close, and we have one more call. And we always seem to have pretty decent calls, so we appreciate that. We never seem to yell too much or anything. If I said something to you like, hey, I looked around and I tried really hard, and I went through all these other different, potential answers, and none of those work. And we just don't know what it is. So it's probably unicorns. Do you think that's a good reason to accept unicorns as the answer there?
No, and that's not what I'm doing either.
It
I'm not
sounds to
saying,
me very much
why I'm
like the
saying
argument from
you.
incredulity is what you're doing. You're saying that we have all of these reasons. We have all of these reasons that don't seem to be perfect enough to actually give us the 100% confidence, which I don't think any of us believe that we can have. But you're then positing an answer because of the simple fact that, well, we don't have another one. Like, we can't think of anything else. But the issue with that is, of course, just like you said, if we only know the 0.1% and there's 99.9% of the things out there in the universe that we don't know, we can't posit an answer unless we have an indication of that specific conclusion, right?
No, I would say that you could use a transrational thought to prove that if a murder happened and you had no idea about a murder, you could still know that a murder itself happened without knowing who did it. So we're looking at
that doesn't answer it at all, because what we're asking about is whether or not there's a dead body. Like, is there a dead body, not is there a murder?
Yeah,
Those are different things. We're asking about where's the
you
dead
would
body,
be, but
where's
you
the
would be the
God.
dead body.
We don't need to know about the murder yet, because that's motive and intention. It doesn't matter to me what God's intentions are yet if we haven't proven that this version of God that you're defining for us, which you don't have a good definition for, until we prove that that's real, me talking about the intentions of this thing seems worthless, right?
No, I wouldn't. I wouldn't say that's correct. I can understand why it makes for a boring conversation, but what we're talking about is the effects. You don't get a chance to look at the cause and observe it and give it you can give it a name. You can name God whatever you want. But what I'm saying is, you are experiencing the effect of something, and just because you can't see it, you're saying, well, there's no reason for me to believe that thing exists. But you're here right now, and you
Right.
exist
Yeah.
because of that.
Yeah. Sure. I am here. So is secularity, and so are you, and so are the beautiful people in chat. And we're here, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the reason why we're here in some ultimate cosmic level is that there is a conscious being that created the universe. That's what I think. That's where you're losing us. Like, okay, there must be some metaphysical substrate for the existence of the universe because it exists, right? I don't think we can say jack shit about what it is, but you think you can. You think that it is a conscious entity, not just a conscious entity, a super mega conscious entity that can set things in motion, that can set universes or multiverses in motion. I just don't know where. Wait. Hang on. I just don't know where you get conscious entity from.
Okay, it's like the Higgs field. So the Higgs field is not conscience, right? It's the thing.
Not as far as we
the
know.
substance.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not. It's well, as far as we know, true. We don't know if it's conscious. I would say that it's not conscience. But what I'm simply saying, the Higgs field was denied until he presented somewhat of great evidence for people to accept it. What I'm trying to say is God is kind of like this Higgs field, which makes him extremely boring. It's like a substance that can create.
Yeah.
And
the issue with that, Xeno, is when I think it was Peter Higgs. I could be wrong on that. So please, somebody down there in chat, tell us. He didn't just go, hey, I'm thinking it's a fuzziness of stuff we don't know, but maybe like something. He presented like a full paper that was then peer reviewed and talked about for years. We posited the Higgs field back in like the 70s or 80s. So yeah, I don't feel like you were really addressing what Johnny was saying there.
Yeah, and Xeno, exactly what Secularity said, that this wasn't just the time to believe that something is true. The time to believe in something is when you have sufficient evidence, and the way that we determine whether there's a sufficient evidence in some sort of scientific claim is through the peer review process, through a bunch of scientists trying to poke holes in it. And after many years, after much experimentation, after a whole lot of math that's far beyond me, they're kind of reduced to saying this appears to be the best explanation that we have. We're still trying to disprove it, right? We're going to keep on trying to do it. And when someone does, it's going to massively change the way we look at physics or whatever it might be. The Higgs field was a concept that was tested for, experimented for, and it started to get resolution, okay? And the time to believe that the Higgs field was totally a thing was after they went through that process. Not, it's real, now let's test for it. No. And that's kind of where it seems that you're at with regard to your unmoved mover.
Well, I would say this last thing and go ahead and let you guys move on. I don't want to brag too much about my credentials, as I think an appeal
Xeno.
to, yeah.
I have a barony.
Hello?
I paid for a barony in Sealand. I'm also a reverend. I'm allegedly have a JD.
Oh, okay.
What do you got? I have a master's degree. Go ahead. What do you got?
Okay, so I develop smart contracts for NFTs and create various forms of dApps, and I also am a massive modder on the GitHub community. And I've been studying computer science for 25 years. I am now 35.
I like it.
I feel that I do have a leg to stand on in this conversation, and there are different ways to approach this. But if you guys are not willing to learn, you can't teach a person, and that's you don't want to come off as preachy, but this is not the place to do it. This isn't the place to give you guys the tools to figure this out. All I can do is touch on the subject, like little by little, gently, to try to get you guys to see there is a formula. But first you have to describe what God is, and that's what this was all about. Like, if you don't call it God, if you call it evolution, then so be it. But there are words that come before evolution as well. Like, evolution is a very vague term. And so there are terms you have.
We've traversed all the way around back to the same place we started. I don't know. That's happened a couple of times today, even though the interlocutor seems to agree with us, Johnny. I'm confused, but I know. Hey, we're at the end anyway, I think. Xeno, thank you. I know you're in charge, Johnny, but I just had to step it because we covered that ground already. We covered all of that.
I like SR. I like Xeno. Call back again.
Please do.
Talk to J Mike and
Yes.
secularity maybe. But I like to give rope. Have some rope. I like to push rope. I like to give rope to people, and you do what you want. Xeno, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. And maybe we're just not thirsty horses. I don't know.